to a new apartment should have been a fresh start. When I first met Anna, my roommate, I thought I'd lucked out. She was polite, with a kind smile, and seemed quiet. The apartment was clean, cheap, and, in a good neighbourhood, perfect. But it didn't take long before things started to feel off. It was the little things at first. Anna knew a lot about me before I'd ever told her. She'd bring up things in conversation that I could have sworn I hadn't mentioned. My favourite childhood TV show, how I liked my coffee, even the name of an ex-boyfriend I hadn't spoken to in years. I brushed it off as coincidence or her being a good listener, but it kept happening. Then came the gifts. A scarf I'd admired in a shop window magically appeared on my bed one morning. "I noticed you liked it," she said with a warm smile. A brand of shampoo I'd used once years ago showed up in the shower. "I figured you'd want to feel more at home," she explained casually. I thanked her, though her attention to detail was starting to creep me out. But how could I accuse her of anything when she was being so thoughtful? It wasn't long before she started inserting herself into every aspect of my life. If I made plans with friends, she'd suggest I stay in and have dinner with her instead. If I wanted to go out, she'd offer to drive, even though it was just a block away. She always had some excuse to keep me close. One night I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door creaking open. The dim light from the hallway outlined Anna's silhouette standing in the doorway, watching me. "Anna," I called, groggy and disoriented. She stepped inside slowly, her bare feet making no noise on the hardwood floor. "I thought I heard you call out for me," she whispered, her voice calm and eerily soft. "You were having a bad dream." "I wasn't. I stammered, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'm fine. Go back to bed." She lingered for a moment, staring at me with an unsettling intensity, before finally turning around. As she closed the door, I realised my phone wasn't on the nightstand where I'd left it. The next morning I found it tucked into her pocket as she prepared breakfast. She just smiled when I pointed it out. "Silly me," she said, handing it back like it was nothing. But it was something, it was everything. Things escalated from there. One evening I came home to find my bedroom rearranged. My clothes had been folded differently, my books moved. Every drawer had been opened and reorganized. When I confronted her, she didn't even deny it. "I noticed you were having trouble keeping things tidy," she said with a straight face, her voice calm but with a tinge of possessiveness. "I thought I could help." "Anna, this has to stop. You can't just—" "Everything I do is for you," she cut in, her eyes wide, unblinking. "You don't understand now, but you will. I just want to take care of you. I know what you need better than you do." That night I locked my bedroom door, but it didn't make me feel any safer. Every creak in the apartment made me jump. Every shadow felt like her watching me. The next morning I decided I needed to leave. But Anna wasn't going to let that happen easily. I started looking for new places, discreetly at first, but she must have sensed something. She started clinging even more. Anytime I wasn't with her, my phone would buzz with messages. "Where are you? Who are you with? Come home, you belong here." One night I came back late after viewing an apartment. Anna was waiting for me in the living room, her usual soft expression replaced by something darker. "Where were you?" she asked quietly, too quietly. "I just went for a walk," I lied, trying to sidestep her suffocating gaze. "A walk," she repeated, stepping closer. "You're lying. I know everything about you, remember?" She reached into her pocket and pulled out my new apartment listing. "You didn't think I'd find out? You were planning to leave me?" I stood frozen, fear clawing at my throat. "Anna, this isn't normal. You're obsessed. You have to stop." Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time her smile faltered. "I'm obsessed," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "I've given you everything. I am everything you need. You just don't realize it yet. But you will." She stepped closer and I backed up against the wall. "Anna, please, I won't let you leave me," she whispered. "You'll see, you'll understand. I've been patient, but I won't let anyone come between us." I bolted to my room and slammed the door. As I locked it, I heard her outside whispering. "You belong with me," she repeated, her voice lilting like a chant. "You're mine!" I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I packed whatever I could fit into a bag and waited for dawn. As soon as the first light broke, I made my move. But as I grabbed my things and reached for the door, I noticed something terrifying. Anna had removed the lock from the inside of the front door. I heard her footsteps coming from the hallway, her soft humming sending a shiver down my spine. "I told you," she said, her voice calm and eerily sweet as she appeared in the doorway. "You can't leave." That was the last thing I remember before the world went dark. I woke up in my room, my wrists tied to the bedposts with soft silken scarves. Anna sat beside me, stroking my hair gently. Her smile was wide, almost loving. "Now you can't leave me," she whispered. "Now you'll stay forever." Well, this was it. This was all I could afford after a bad breakup and a job loss. It wasn't perfect, but it was home, and Greg, my new roommate, seemed decent enough. He kept to himself mostly, but we had our occasional chats over dinner. I noticed right away that he was a bit odd, though, always staying up late, disappearing into the woods at strange hours, but I chalked it up to him being eccentric. Who wasn't these days? One night, things changed. I was in bed, half asleep, when I heard something strange coming from the living room. Greg's voice. It sounded off, like he was mumbling to himself, but there was an odd guttural undertone to it. I figured maybe he was watching TV too loud, so I pulled the covers over my head and tried to ignore it, but then I heard my own name, whispered like a slithering hiss. "Elliot. Elliot." I froze. My bedroom door was slightly ajar, and through the gap I could see the flicker of light from the living room. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. Why was he saying my name? What was he doing out there, whispering like that? The next morning I confronted him. He looked at me with blank, disinterested eyes when I brought it up. "I don't remember saying anything," he shrugged. "You must have been dreaming." I could tell he was lying, but I couldn't push it further without sounding paranoid. Besides, I wanted to believe it was nothing. But after that, things got worse, much worse. I started hearing those same whispers almost every night. They'd start off quiet, like a breeze sneaking under the door, but they would grow louder, more insistent. "Elliot, Elliot." Always my name, over and over. Sometimes I swore I could hear footsteps just outside my door, slow, deliberate, like someone pacing back and forth, waiting for the right moment to come in. One night, I had enough. I swung my door open, ready to confront Greg, but the living room was empty. The TV was off, the lights dimmed, and no one was there. I checked Greg's room, and to my shock, he was asleep. His breathing was slow and steady, too deep to be faked. I backed out of his room, confused, and headed back to bed, though sleep didn't come easy. The real terror began a few nights later. I came home late from work, exhausted and barely able to keep my eyes open. As I unlocked the door and stepped inside, I noticed something strange. Greg was sitting on the couch, but there was something off about him. His back was to me, but his posture was wrong, too stiff. His neck seemed slightly elongated, and his skin looked strange in the dim light, almost stretched too tight over his bones. "Hey, Greg," I called out, my voice trembling slightly. "You okay?" He didn't answer at first, just sat there, unnervingly still, Then, slowly, he turned his head toward me. I felt my blood run cold. His face was wrong, his eyes were too wide, his mouth stretched into an unnatural grin that split across his face, wider than any human smile should ever be. His skin seemed to twitch, as if something underneath was struggling to break free. "Elliot," he said, his voice raspy and distorted, like two voices speaking at once. One was his and the other was something else. "I've been waiting for you." I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. "What the hell is wrong with you, Greg?" He stood up slowly, his movements jerky, like a puppet being yanked by invisible strings. The room was filled with a stench, a mix of rotting meat and something else I couldn't place, a deep, earthy smell like wet soil. Then, before my eyes, Greg's body began to shift. His skin rippled unnaturally and his bones popped, cracking loudly as his form began to change. His face stretched further, his eyes turning dark and hollow, his limbs elongating grotesquely. He wasn't Greg anymore. He was something else, something wearing Greg's skin. I turned and bolted for the door, fumbling with the lock, my hands shaking. As I ran, I could hear the sound of something wet and heavy slapping against the floor behind me, and that awful voice calling my name again and again. "Elliot, come back, come back." I never returned to that apartment. I grabbed what I could the next day with the police escorting me, but they didn't find anything, no sign of Greg, no sign of anyone. The place was empty, and they looked at me like I was crazy, but I know what I saw. Greg, or whatever had been wearing him, was still out there, somewhere, waiting, watching, and every time I hear a noise outside my window at night, I wonder if it's him, if it's it waiting for me to come home. I found the apartment listing on a local site, cheap, close to work, and with an open room available immediately. My new roommate, Kevin, seemed normal enough when I first met him. He was quiet, tidy, and didn't bother me much. We exchanged pleasantries, but mostly kept to ourselves. Honestly, it felt like a perfect setup. The first few weeks went by smoothly. Kevin worked late hours, so we hardly saw each other, which suited me fine. But then strange things started happening. Little things at first. I'd wake up to find the front door unlocked. I was sure I'd locked it before bed. The first couple of times I just figured Kevin had forgotten, but it kept happening almost every night. I started to feel uneasy, so I brought it up casually one morning over coffee. "Hey man, you've been leaving the door unlocked a lot. It's making me a little paranoid," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. Kevin gave me a blank look before smiling slightly. "Yeah, sorry about that. Sometimes I get back so late, I just forget." His tone was light, but something in his eyes made me uneasy. I brushed it off, convincing myself it was just the late hours getting to me. But then things started to escalate. I'd come home from work and notice weird things. My bedroom door, which I always left shut, would be cracked open. My things, my wallet, keys, phone, would be moved around, though nothing was missing. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was just tired. One night I was sitting on the couch flipping through channels when Kevin came home. It was late, almost midnight, but he seemed unusually cheerful, humming a song under his breath. He dropped his jacket on the kitchen chair and glanced over at me. "Long night?" I asked, trying to break the awkward silence. "Yeah," he said, flashing me a grin, "but productive." There was something unsettling about the way he said it. I didn't know what he did for work exactly, just that he often came home late, or his clothes sometimes splattered with mud or grease, or at least that's what I thought it was. I never asked too many questions, but that night, as he went into his room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next morning, While he was still asleep, I found myself standing outside his door. I don't know why. I guess I just wanted to understand who I was living with. I told myself I was being stupid, but my hand was already on the doorknob, turning it ever so slowly. I stepped inside, the air heavy and stale. The first thing I noticed was how clean the room was. Almost too clean, like no one really lived there. But then I saw it, half hidden under his bed, a large duffel bag, partially unzipped. My heart started racing as I knelt down and pulled it out. Inside were clothes, dirty, stained clothes, crumpled and thrown together carelessly. But it wasn't just the clothes, there was something else too. Small items, trinkets almost. A necklace, a wallet, a set of keys that definitely didn't belong to him. My hands trembled as I picked up one of the wallets and opened it. It belonged to a woman I'd seen on the news just a few days ago. She'd gone missing, and now here I was, holding her wallet in my hands. I shoved the bag back under the bed, my heart pounding in my chest. What the hell was Kevin hiding? Suddenly I heard the floor creak behind me. I spun around to find Kevin standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Looking for something?" he asked, his voice calm but with a sharp edge. I stammered, trying to come up with an excuse, but the words stuck in my throat. His gaze was steady, cold, and calculating. I was just... Kevin stepped forward, his eyes never leaving mine. "You shouldn't go through other people's things," he said softly. "It's rude." I forced a laugh, trying to act like it was no big deal, but the tension in the air was suffocating. "Yeah, sorry, I was just looking for the remote." He didn't move. His smile stayed plastered on his face, but his eyes, they were dead. "You know," he continued, his voice unsettlingly calm, "it's funny. You can learn a lot about someone by going through their things." My heart was racing now. I had to get out of there. "Well, I'll just leave you to it," I muttered, brushing past him and heading for the door. But as I reached for the handle, his hand landed on my shoulder, firm and heavy. "We should talk," he said, his grip tightening, "about boundaries." I yanked myself free and bolted into the living room, grabbing my keys off the table. As I fumbled to unlock the front door, I heard him behind me, his footsteps slow and deliberate. "You shouldn't have done that," he said quietly, almost like a parent scolding a child. I threw the door open and sprinted out into the hallway, my heart pounding in my ears. I didn't stop until I reached the street, gasping for air. I called the police that night, gave them the woman's name, and told them everything. It didn't take long for them to search the apartment. They found more than I had. Photos, IDs, personal items from at least 6 missing women. Kevin was arrested, but the haunting part was that during the entire process, he never stopped smiling.